My name is Debra Cashion. I'm from the University of St. Louis University, and I also work with an American consortium of libraries called Digital Scriptorium. They're libraries and museums that own collections of pre-modern manuscripts. And the majority of the work I do has to do with creating access to uncatalogued collections of pre-modern manuscripts. And that's what this talk today is about, one of those projects. So, you are looking at a detail of a double portrait of Dante and Petrarch, scanned from a microfilm of a mid-14th century Italian manuscript of the Divine Comedy. Identified by the Vatican shelf mark Vatlat 3199, the manuscript falls into an information gap in the Vatican catalogs between Vatlat 2192 and Vatlat 9734. In spite of the fact that it is uncatalogued, it's an extraordinary and exceptional manuscript with a pedigree of ownership. It was commissioned by Boccaccio, who gave it to his friend Petrarch as a gift, with a persuasive dedication that Dante was actually a great writer, even if he wrote in Italian instead of Latin. Later, in the early 16th century, the manuscript was copied by Cardinal Pietro Bembo, a Dante scholar himself, as a press copy for his friend Aldus Manutius, the renowned publisher of Renaissance Venice. Aldus used Bembo's autographed copy. Today, the shelf mark Vatlat 3197 also falls in the gap in the catalogs, to print in 1502 the first Aldine edition of the Divine Comedy, entitled La Terza Rima, for which Aldus used his newly invented typeface with slanted letters, today known as italic, because it became the standard typeface for works printed in Italian, as opposed to those printed in Latin. METAscripta is a project to create a digital research environment for the microfilm collection of Vatican manuscripts at the Vatican Film Library of St. Louis University. This digital humanities project responds to a significant need in manuscript studies because about 3/4 of the Vatican's 80,000 pre-modern manuscripts are shrouded in the darkness of inaccessibility because they are either inadequately cataloged or not cataloged at all. The VFL microfilm collection, designed to serve as a practical entry to the study of Vatican manuscripts, is also obscured by a lack of descriptive metadata, and at present the VFL database can only be searched by either Vatican shelf mark or VFL microfilm roll number. Many of you probably know that if you've done research there. METAscripta, however, supports user searches by means of newly created discovery metadata that enables scholars to find uncatalogued Vatican manuscripts, not only by shelf mark, but also by language, century, and country of origin, instead of traditional cataloging by author title. METAscripta's metadata tools will help users find their way through thousands of uncatalogued and undiscovered Vatican manuscripts, guiding us like Virgil leading Dante out of the dark wood and continuing along a path of preservation, access, and shared cultural heritage that goes back to World War II. 8 years after World War II ended, the Vatican Film Library of St. Louis University was founded in 1953 under the supervision of Lowry J. Daly, Society of Jesus and Professor of Medieval History, and Charles J. Ermatinger, Professor of Philosophy and the first librarian of the Vatican Film Library. Here they are posing with a drawer of positive microfilms that are still available for scholars to study at the Vatican Film Library in St. Louis. The master negatives to these films, made in the 1950s with the Kodak silver gelatin process, are the source materials for this project. Now, Ermatinger's background contributed to the motivation for the original project, which was to microfilm as much as possible the Vatican Library's collection of pre-modern manuscripts. During World War II, Ermatinger served as a member of the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives section of the Associated Allied Forces assigned to protect and safeguard European civilization's most important artistic and cultural treasures from the ravages of war and the greed of the Nazis. If you'd like to know more about the Monuments Men, there is a real foundation and website dedicated to their history. But more fun is a Hollywood movie with George Clooney, Matt Damon, and Cate Blanchett from 2014, and you can watch trailers about that on YouTube. Having witnessed the destruction of major libraries such as the Monastery of Monte Cassino, Ermatinger saw the need for the replication of culturally valuable texts in order to help preserve them for the future. We know from records in St. Louis that Pope Pius XII himself had concerns that the conditions in Europe are much too unsettled and chaotic for sustained study, scholarship, and research. If the Holy See could in any way encourage, foster, and help scholarship and research in the United States, he would be happy to cooperate with the people in St. Louis. Thus, plans were made to set up a fully equipped microfilming shop at the Vatican, as well as to build a new library in St. Louis, which, according to the letter signed by Pope Pius, would become a spacious temple of learning, a storehouse of the good, the true, and the beautiful. I'm not sure that Pope Pius XII could have imagined how differently his temple of learning looks today, but we are trying to live up to his aspirations, if only virtually in a digital environment. So, supported by an internal grant we received this year from the Research Growth Fund for $160,000, we've been able to recently hire our own developer and are building the pilot stage of the project in using Omeka tools from Omeka Classic, including a IIIF plugin developed at the University of Toronto and a 2IP image server module developed by Daniel Berthereau for Omeka S. Although it's not quite ready for live demonstration, the following slides will show how METAscripta will function. Each user will create their own account in order to save their work to a dedicated space just for them. The user starts here and logs in. Then the user goes to the search tool to either discover new manuscripts or access known manuscripts by Vatican shelf mark. After choosing a manuscript, in this case VATLAT 3199, the manuscript we looked at from the beginning, the user lands on a page for a given manuscript and has several choices about where to go next. They can view the manuscript in Mirador, they can download a PDF file of the whole manuscript, they can blog about the manuscript in a user forum, they can contribute descriptive metadata about the manuscript to a crowdsourcing metadata template, they can link to outside resources including the Vatican catalogs and websites, and they can return to the search index. This user, we have an imaginary user now, this user chose to open the manuscript in the IIIF-supported Mirador viewer, and here in this view you can see, hopefully see some of the quality of the films that we're digitizing from these original master negatives. In Mirador, the user can not only study the Dante manuscript, but also add more content through the Mirador user annotation tools. These tools allow the user to highlight areas, Andrew talked about this, with shapes and colors, which then can be described and embellished through the use of the annotation tool pop-up windows, as well as through embedded links to other online resources. All of these user-generated annotations then can be saved to the user's own account, so they're still there the next time they return to work. And here, one of the tools that one of the resources this user has found is something called the Digital Dante website at the Columbia University in New York. Now, this user has saved other manuscripts to their individually protected account associated with their login. The other manuscripts can be from any digital repository supported by IIIF. In the Mirador viewer, they can also be open, studied, annotated, and compared to the newly discovered manuscript from the VFL microfilm collection. Here the user has returned to Mirador to compare three digital manuscripts. One is the VFL microfilm version of VATLAT 3199, the Divine Comedy commissioned by Boccaccio and given to Petrarch. The second one in the middle is VATLAT 3197, a copy of the first manuscript written for Aldus by Pietro Bembo, and accessible on the DigiVatLib website, the Vatican Library's digital website. The third manuscript is Ricardiana 1035, and it's not in the Vatican, but at the Biblioteca Ricardiana in Florence. But it's not even digitized there, it's displayed on the World Digital Library website. The third manuscript, by the way, is one of three autographed copies of the Divine Comedy written out by Boccaccio himself. And here you can see all the user annotation windows have been opened, and the user has annotated them, and the underlined text indicates embedded hyperlink. This comparative viewing and annotating is possible because all 3 digital manuscripts have been developed using the IIIF framework. Here is a view of ATLAT 3199 displayed in Hometown Bodleian Library's IIIF manifest editor, which we used to make the first JSON manuscripts we needed in order for the Mirador viewer to display our manuscripts. The Bodleian editor also allowed us to include the embedded metadata that we created in order to search the manuscripts by shelf mark, language, country, and century. Once the manifest was created, the manuscript was ready to be viewed not only in Mirador, but in any other IIIF-supported display tool such as OpenSeaDragon or the Universal Viewer, which is the one the Bodleian Library uses. Besides studying and annotating manuscripts for themselves, advanced users of METAscripta will also be able to contribute to the cataloging of Vatican manuscripts through crowdsourced descriptions managed by controlled vocabularies and linked open data. A crowdsourcing metadata template directs users to contribute useful information without previous training in library cataloging. The metadata template is faceted according to context, carrier, or content so that users understand what aspect of the manuscript they're describing, and the metadata is controlled for indexing by linking to authority files such as VIAF or the Getty Art and Architecture Thesaurus. All data fields are repeatable, so no user overwrites the contributions of another, and all contributed data will be saved and displayed. We're going to leave our user who is still at work researching Dante manuscripts, opening embedded links to relevant content on other websites, retrieved through the annotations saved to the user's own account. These include the Columbia University Digital Dante website, the printed but illuminated Aldine edition at the Newberry Library, and the Decameron Web Project at Brown University. Those are all resources that have been open while the user is still in the METAscripta digital environment. And if you'd like to know more about the project, please visit our website at metascriptomeka.net, which is on the bookmark I just gave to all of you. Thank you very much.
Debra, thank you very much. Our 3 speakers have been speaking beautifully to time, so we do have time for questions for Debra before we have a short break for tea. Some questions for Debra? Yes, Mark.
Debra, you said that it's possible to search on the shelf model.
Yes.
If you know it. And if you don't know it and you just want to do a general search, how does that?
Well, that would be then, you would use the discovery metadata, which is very coarse metadata. It's not precise. It's not very granular, but by language, century, or country of origin, which I know from my own work is how most of us specialize who work in manuscripts. So we have specific languages, specific historical periods, and specific geographic periods that most of us tend to specialize. So I thought it would be a very useful way for creating like a coarse metadata discovery tool, so people could find manuscripts that no one's studied, and that the Vatican hasn't cataloged, and that we haven't cataloged.
In light of the digitization work of the Vatican, has this brought anything, has this sort of brought new value in your microfilms in showing earlier states of manuscripts?
Well, we work together, especially I work with Paolo Manoni at the Vatican coordinating our projects, and we give them access to the metadata records we created. This summer we gave them 4,600 records based on our metadata, which they can decide to use how they want to, and we will continue to do that. And what's wonderful is that there's a symbiosis, is not a competition between the 2 projects, and especially we want to help them catalog their manuscripts. the digitization effort that's going on at the Vatican, at least for most of the manuscripts, does not include a cataloging project. It's a digitization project. So there's lots of things going up just by shelf mark. Get a fully digitized manuscript, but there's no metadata tools to access it except shelf mark.
Yeah. Please, do you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, the 3199 is available fully digitized on the Vatican
Yes.
site. So are you linking from METAscripta where there are kind of modern digitizations of the manuscript? Are you linking through to those?
We could do that. The idea is that you can pull any of them into the viewer. The reason I use 3199 is that it is digitized at the Vatican, but it fit into the theme better. I have another demonstration that I could do actually live in my laptop with exultant roles, one of which is the earliest one that I think the Vatican is nervous about digitizing, but was microfilm back in the 1950s, and so we've got that on microfilm. And then there's two other exultant roles that the Vatican has digitized. So I have a demonstration where you can look at all three of those. I can also tell you that what I was so excited about when we started the project was the quality of the silver gelatin master negatives. I mean, you can blow them up the size of that screen, and they're really extraordinarily rich images. They just don't have colors. And then we also QC every manuscript in Photoshop Camera Raw to get the best quality representation of it that we can out of the microfilms. So there are very legible, the representations. They're only representations of the manuscript, but they are extraordinarily legible. So there may be times when someone is really studying a text or looking at an interlinear gloss or something, might actually prefer to work in the microfilm instead of the pixelated, low JPEG digital quality. And the other thing is about what's interesting about using digitized microfilms is because they're not color, you can get a bigger file, JPEG, online because it's not as heavy a file as a color JPEG.
Yeah. And we were hearing earlier, weren't we, about having to for the script recognition, having to make it black and white.
Oh,
and
right.
So
they would already did that.
At a higher resolution. So you've actually got
there you
a
go.
better quality image for that process. I mean, my question I was going to ask is, what's the overlap between? Do you think there's a proportional overlap between what the Vatican has digitised and what you've digitised, and what have you got that they haven't done? I mean, what's the sort of proportion?
It's almost impossible to coordinate that. It's so random what was digitized or what was microfilmed and what the Vatican's decided to digitize.
Yes.
Those two things have not been coordinated.
Right.
And I'm not sure if we can do it because also the microfilm collection was never inventoried, so we don't know what's coming at us.
God. Right.
And so one of the things we had to do is there's a lot of the manuscripts, the big manuscripts, are split into, say, 3 different parts on different rolls. And sometimes part 2 comes before part 1, and we don't know where part 1 is in the first place, or if we even have it. So it's kind of difficult for us to.
So you don't even know what you've got. Really?
Not altogether. I mean, we do have a very clumsy database where that kind of information was dumped into in a really terrible way.
But I think what you were saying about the quality of the images is very striking, isn't it? I mean, we've all used microfilms that are great.
Really awful, yeah.
Really, truly awful. But these are stunning artifacts in themselves, aren't they?
Yeah, they're kind of fun. Yeah.
No, it's been very, very helpful. Any other questions? Yes.
In terms of metadata, do you mean that you can't search by author and work and only search by century?
Yeah, you can search by author for most of the Vatican's.
I know.
Yeah.
Since you're creating new.
Oh no, because we don't have that kind of bandwidth. I mean, I've got students. I train students to do the cataloging we're doing, and I'm the only scholar that could possibly do that in the library, especially since we had one other. She's retired. So that's why nothing's cataloged, is because the author title is such a heavy lift for so many libraries that there's no one on staff that can crack open an unidentified manuscript. And you can even read it. I mean, I do a lot of this, and you can start reading and you go, well, this is some kind of commentary on Genesis, but I don't know what it is.
So
you know.
They can do data? I mean, data manuscripts.
Oh yeah, because we learned paleographic tools, and we use as much. The fifth metadata attribute is a citation, so we always have one citation, either to a Vatican catalog, a Studia Testi article, or some secondary resource. I mean, we try not to guess. If there's literature about a manuscript, we find it. But there's also lots of them that just have no literature. So, and then sometimes we'll give a range. That's why we do century. We don't do circa 1325 or something like that. We do century, and sometimes if we're really not sure, that's a 2-century window.
What do you do for language?
For language? Yeah, language is probably the easiest one. You know, I mean, we don't have to read it. We just have to look at it and go, okay, it's Arabic or close enough, and then that, you know what I mean? I mean, but I have wonderful grad students, and I have a graduate student fellowship that rotates on the cataloging, we had a PhD in theology student 1 year cataloged like 1,300 Greek manuscripts for us, and he was amazing. He was really what I do is, depending on who gets that fellowship, then I steer the cataloging in their direction.
Yeah.
So I work with their expertise, and then they learn. Usually they don't have the paleography tools, and that's what I teach them.